Hello Internet, welcome back to the Tromsø Twilight, the channel where I, Vincent, talk to you, the abyss, about books, movies, music that I find interesting, that I enjoy, or a combination of the two. And today we're going to be talking about a book, The Door into Summer by Robert A. Heinlein. I guess that's how you pronounce his name. I've never heard it said. Never judge a person who mispronounces a word that they've only read. Robert A. Heinlein, let's call him that. So I mentioned on an earlier video that a couple of years back, post-pandemic, I was having some trouble reading. My brain was not working properly. I went back to classic sci-fi as one of the types of literature that had originally engendered my joy in reading, and started trying to read stuff that I missed the first time around when I was a kid. And this one is SF Masterworks edition of The Door into Summer, which originally was published in 1959, I believe. No, 1957. Heinlein is best known for having written Starship Troopers, which was made into a film, which is still continually debated on the internet as to whether or not it was a satire. But I was told by a friend of mine that his original portrayal of militarism was not necessarily satirical. I believe that Robert A. Heinlein was some kind of libertarian, interested in nonconformity and controversial ideas and individual freedom. So I guess like the sci-fi version of Frank Zappa. Now I'm not going to talk at length about this book, but I will be engaging in some pretty appalling spoilers. Otherwise, I can't say what I found most unsettling about it. But to give it a quick summary, it's about a guy called Dan Davis. He's an inventor in the way of, I guess, 50s and 60s sci-fi, the idea that being an inventor would be a job where you could just invent loads of cool machines. He invents some machines that make domestic labor easier. So I guess this was very relevant at the time when stuff like the vacuum cleaner was coming into popular usage and freeing up a lot of time for people who otherwise did domestic chores, especially women. But he is betrayed by his business partner and his fiancée. They are grifters who get together and betray him. And so he decides that he's going to go into cryogenic stasis, which in the book is called the cold sleep. And so, on this channel, I like to try and be positive. There are some very entertaining things about this book. One of the things is this whole business of the cold sleep and how it's kind of used to travel into the future, essentially, and how it's also used against him. Like he can be taken to the wrong doctor to be put into the cold sleep for the wrong length of time in the wrong place. He wakes up. I think it's I can't exactly remember when he wakes up now. I think the book starts in 1970. He wakes up in the 90s or the 2000s, and all the world has changed. But it turns out someone has developed his original inventions, and that these have become very central in society. To cut a long story short, he also manages to find a scientist who has created time travel back in time, and that whole sequence in the book is very amusing and entertaining, where he finds this kind of very frustrated and somewhat unsuccessful scientific researcher at a university, and uses his technology to travel back in time. So he creates a situation where he's able to travel back in time with time travel and forward in time with cryogenics. And he tries to hook it up so that the things that went wrong in his life can be fixed, basically, and so that he can set himself up in the best possible life in the future. It's kind of noirish in its narration. He's an alcoholic at the beginning. He rails a lot against various things in society. He also has lots of knowledge about like economics and science in the way that you might expect an American libertarian to have. And he is pretty negative about basically everybody apart from his cat. So he very much loves his cat. The way that the other people in the book are described is, in contemporary parlance, it's kind of like listening to a narcissist. Everybody is worse than him. And women are not portrayed very sympathetically, with the sole exception of, I believe it's his ex-business partner's stepdaughter. Is it maybe his fiance's daughter? I can't remember, but 12-year-old girl called Ricky. And he finds her, very charming, very adorable, which no doubt many 12-year-old girls are. But the happy ending of the book, the denouement, is that he manages to kind of set this girl Ricky up for a good future also, and they make an agreement so that they'll structure time so that he was in his 30s when he met her, when she was, or when he knew her when she was 12, and they work it out so that they'll both go into cryogenics uh, at certain points. Like, she'll stay behind when he goes into cryogenics and she'll sort out some things, and then she'll put herself into cryogenics at a certain point, I believe. And then they'll basically both meet up in the future when she's 21, and then they'll get married and live happily ever after. So it's basically the story of this 30-year-old guy uh, finding a plan with a 12-year-old girl that they'll be together exactly when she's old enough. And now I know it's very fashionable to be very kind of judgmental and very moralistic about age gaps in literature and fiction and things like that, which generally speaking, I don't think is necessarily that interesting. Um, and I also do think that we should have an understanding for the fact that relationships can change. So, the fact that somebody knew somebody when they were a kid doesn't mean that that relationship necessarily can't be different when that person becomes an adult. But it's a little bit different when you plan it from when they're 12 and you agree that you'll marry them when they're 12 and then you send them into the future to. So I guess I just found this really creepy, and it made and I also found this central character enormously unsympathetic, not just because he was clearly grooming a kid, but also because, he just hated everything apart from this kid and a cat. And I was like, a child and a cat, what do these things have in common? They don't really have any agency. They don't really have developed personalities. They can't challenge you in any way. So as a kind of fantasy, I found the whole thing kind of disturbing, and especially because I didn't get the sense, as you might get in a book like Nabokov's Lolita, that this character was in any way being like parodied or that there was an ironic distance. I really think this is an adventure novel, and you're supposed to sympathize, I think, with the narrator, especially because he's so hard done by, and he triumphs in the end. So yeah, it was kind of an interesting read because it was a romp, and it had some enjoyable, very kind of old-fashioned science fiction tropes, and it was interesting to see this idea of the future as automated, almost in a like hydraulic or mechanical fashion, without really an imagination of the digital world. Uh, but the central character and this uh, strange, unsettling ending that might remind you of what Kendrick Lamar said about Drake, uh, made me think that maybe I wasn't super enthusiastic to read more Robert A. Heinlein. So, have you read this book? What did you think about it? Am I wrong? Should I read another book by him? Um, what's your opinion on him as an author? I'd love to hear from you. I always love to hear from people in the comments if you should be so inclined. If not, thanks for listening to me, and see you again soon.